Hello and welcome to another episode of DirectConnect. I'm Leonard Chamberlin, one of the managing partners with Archer, joined by fellow managing partners today, Stacy Bresler, Brent Castagnetto, and Steve Parker. If you're watching this, that means you made it through the 250th birthday celebration with your life intact and practice safe firework practice. So all your fingers are there, hopefully. But no, we wanted to get on today to talk about how buying more security tools won't make you more secure or compliant by themselves. So many times we've gone into different organizations, and the management perspective is, well, just go buy this tool and it'll take care of this issue for us. Or in some cases that's the line that the vendor sold them, right? Buy our tool and it's a silver bullet to handle this requirement or this vulnerability for you. But again, that's not necessarily the case. Buying more tools does not necessarily make you more secure. So, Brent, I'm going to pick on you first. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, this is a challenge that's faced by every organization. When you look at the tool sets that, whether you're a large or you're a small utility, you're going to have a specific tool set that your corporate environment or IT is kind of pushing down on you. And they may not solve your specific problems, especially when it comes to security related issues. So being an active buyer, I think, is critically important. If you're not if you're not participating actively as a leader in your organization in the buying process to help solve your specific problems, you're going to create, fragmented or overlapping systems that just don't give you the full benefit of what you're looking to do and may not solve your problem.
Well, they may increase your problem, right? Staffing issues. Yeah, you may not have the proper staffing to support that tool. So I'm sorry I'm jumping in here, but this is a topic that really is something I had to learn years and years ago, and Steve can attest that. When I was at a very large, fully integrated utility, I thought the solution was buy as many tools as possible, and then that'll solve two things. One, my technical staff will be happy because they got all kinds of fun things to play with, and it'll make management see that we're making progress. But what it did was create a considerable amount of overhead. We couldn't manage everything. And ultimately, it wasn't solving the problems. We identified that processes that had to solve the problem, and we really had to look at our organization as what did we do, what could we do, and what could we manage, and find that central set of people and processes and tools that we could make as the biggest impact on our security front. And that ended up for us being a security logging solution was the best bang for the buck. But it took a lot of lessons to be learned from that. So, buyer beware. And I like that term, Brent, that you just said, active buyer. That's a huge part of this. I don't know, Steve, do you remember those times?
I do. I'm having some flashbacks to that, but I was just perusing online, looking at some dictionary definitions of the word tool, without quoting any particular definition. The general theme is that a tool is something that is an aid or an assist to get something done. Right? The tools, as typically defined, don't perform a job or a task by itself. If you order up a bunch of lumber from Home Depot and then bought a hammer and a saw, whatever your project isn't going to assemble itself, right? You need to have humans out there, or maybe robots or something to actually do the work. And I think that's the point you were trying to make, Stacy. And I had a joke in mind about AI or something. If it's an AI-enabled tool, does that make a difference? But then maybe that's a different discussion. But the point is the tools themselves aren't going to make you compliant, right? You need to have skilled, trained, experienced, knowledgeable staff, and the tools are assisting those people in getting the job done.
Well, that's a great analogy because I have a car in my garage that needs a gas tank replaced. I've bought all those parts and I've bought all the tools to do it. It's still not done for some reason. I don't get it.
No, the amazing concepts there. The idea that you need to be an active buyer, not just, you know, taking whatever your vendors tell you at face value, but actually going out and educating yourself and ensuring that you're buying, you know, a tool that's suited for your environment and addresses your particular challenges. Brent, you mentioned fragmented tools as well. Um, yeah, I mean, in my experience, you know, having a bunch of different, you know, one-offs is not as solid an approach as having some consolidated solution that really kind of collapses all of the functionality, or you know, not necessarily all, but as much as possible into a single platform. You know, that cuts down on the overhead. That was another thing, Stacy, I think you brought it up, you know, as far as the personnel challenges associated with managing all of these tools. And it's not just the management part, it's the configuration. Steve, I think you mentioned that, you know, straight out of the box, these things aren't going to do what they've been sold to do. You know, they have to be configured, tuned for your environment in a lot of cases. Um, so yeah, lots of different challenges here to think about. You know, it's not just a plug and play. One thing I don't know that we've touched on a ton, and I'm interested in y'all's thoughts, is, you know, the processes behind this, kind of the vision, the outcomes, you know, the defined promised land that you're, you know, searching for. You know, if that roadmap isn't there to ensure that all these tools are consistently getting the organization to that point, um, my experience is it's not likely to get them there.
That's so true. Yeah, and you touched on the people process, but there's also the care and feeding, not just the configuration, care and feeding. You got to patch it, you got to update it. In our space, security products tend to be sold a lot to another organization, and that causes issues. So it's a very important decision to bring in a tool. And often it's brought in before you even know your business requirements or what process you're trying to automate. And therefore you're not ready for the tool. That's why the term shelf-ware became a real thing, because we're not ready. We don't know what to do with it. So we'll just put it over here for a while.
That speaks to that active buyer. You have to understand what problem you're trying to solve. Having corporate or IT, you know, push solutions down on you, it just continues to lead to that sprawl, right? That fragmented visibility when you have tool sprawl that's all over the place, and that leads to alert fatigue, because more tools equals more noise. And so your people are listening to things or seeing things that aren't really relevant or meaningful. And then you end up with that shelfware situation or a misconfigured tool that really isn't working the way you expect it to. And when auditors come calling, you try and reconcile that data, and it's like, holy cow, we just completely missed the boat because we thought this tool was working, but it wasn't configured the way we needed it to be.
Talking about compliance, I mean, that's another challenge, and something certainly to consider. You know, if you're installing this tool and one of the goals is to satisfy a regulatory requirement or prepare, you know, generate some type of evidence for audit, you got to know, number one, is it capable of doing that? Is it going to produce something that someone can understand, right? Is it going to clearly demonstrate that you've met these requirements without having some ridiculous narrative associated with it, and, you know, other performance evidence, if you will, that isn't necessarily, you know, output? So, you know, thinking about all of those aspects on the front end, not after you've purchased the product, certainly highly recommended.
Well, and one thing I think is the days of old where you would just buy a tool for a specific issue. Malware comes to mind. You know, we used to buy tools because we had malicious code or viruses just running rampant, and so you'd buy the tool to fix that problem, right? Well, now these tools have matured to a point where they're actually part of a workflow. They're part of a security process. And that's why I think those business needs really need to be documented first before you even start thinking not only the business needs, but the processes by which you're going to perform and expect that tool to do. Like you said, the inputs and the outputs. Those are so critical in selecting the right tool. But you should be able to write that down and have that process in a manual state and be able to, basically codify it in some way before you go try to buy a tool or implement it into an existing tool. And just before I stop, Brent, you made we keep on talking about being smart buyers and talking about sprawl of tools. That's why I try to advise, clients to first look inside. What do you have already that might meet this need? Swallow your pride a little bit. You might want that new shiny object, but that's not helping your company necessarily. Look at it from an 80-20 perspective. Take, 100% of what your wants and accept 80% of that.
Yeah, it's a valid point, Stacy, on you mentioned early on the categorization. And I think in the early days, products would pop up and there'd be a very clear category. What we're seeing now is a lot of blurring of the lines between categories. We see subcategories, a lot of overlapping. And then you had mentioned the tool purchases. We're seeing that as well, where some new innovative tool will, in some cases, create a new category, and then they get bought up by larger companies, integrated into tool suites, and that gets it creates a lot of overlap. So really being careful on what you buy, knowing exactly what you want, and being cognizant of what you already have, so that what you're buying is going to fit into that overall ecosystem of tools without wasting money on features you don't need or creating overlap.
That's a interesting scenario you just mentioned there, Steve, which, obviously we're seeing happen more and more in the industry. And that's, companies buying other companies, buying other tools and incorporating them into a larger, portfolio. Sometimes that makes the tool better, but generally what we've seen is that the quality of the original tool suffers under the new ownership. Given, again, the prevalence of this occurring in the industry, I'm just curious, do we have any thoughts on how a company could maybe proactively protect themselves from that scenario? Or is there really not much they can do?
Don't buy long-term licensing agreements, right?
Okay.
Try to keep to annual licensing or something, so you can shift and pivot. But no, you have to be prepared to shift and pivot. It's challenging because sometimes you build your workflow process around a given tool, and that's a good thing because you get the most out of that tool, but it also creates a lock-in scenario, and it raises the cost of switching, which is a bit of a risk.
Yeah, I think that's, it goes without saying, though, that vendors, if you're listening to this, we're not against tools. We love them. They help us, right? Couldn't do all this work without them, but help your clients understand, the total cost of ownership. We don't use that term enough. I know it's an old term, and it's a lot of pain to try to calculate that. But if that is a huge part of helping them understand that your tool isn't that silver bullet that Leonard mentioned at the beginning. It's not going to fix all your problems just by buying the product. You got to understand the staffing levels you need. You have to understand, what infrastructure is going to be required. I can't tell you how many times I've seen security teams, speaking to you CSOs or CISOs, buy a product before even talking to the IT department. And the IT department's surprised by all the things that they need to consider, which sometimes is power to the rack. That could be an issue. It could be the fact that they can't install it and they're not going to let you install it. They can't install it for 6 months to a year because they have a backlog of business functions that they have to fix. So, really vendors, help them somehow purchase your product with full knowledge. I get it out somehow. I just think it's really important for both vendors and clients to work together and just be buyer beware, but buy when it's right.
Well said, Stacy. And I think that's a good note to close out this episode on. So thank you, gentlemen, for making time to chat today about this topic. And appreciate everyone who tuned in to watch. And we'll be back in the near future with another episode of DirectConnect. Thank you very much. Take care.
Your support drives us forward. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications, ensuring you never miss out on valuable insights. When it comes to safeguarding your business, Archer is your trusted partner. Explore our robust solutions at archerint.com. Get in touch with an email or phone call and fortify your company's defenses. We value your input. Share your thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to cover, and tune in every other Wednesday for a brand new episode of Direct Connect.